Today we're exposing the shocking truth behind Yamaha's banned RZ500, a two-stroke beast with real racing blood in its veins. Before we go on, did you know the RZ500 had a V4 engine and weighed just 438 pounds? That's basically race bike numbers with turn signals. It was so close to Kenny Roberts' YZR500 that it felt illegal just looking at it. We're breaking down why this bike vanished from the market, what made it so dangerous, and how it became a legend. If you make it to the end of the video, there's a surprise bonus section waiting for you. The two-stroke beast that shouldn't have existed. Yamaha was tearing it up in Grand Prix racing in the 1980s, and they had a V4 two-stroke monster crushing the competition. Instead of keeping all that magic locked away in the paddock, they did something completely insane. Enter the Yamaha RZ500, also known as the RD500LC in some parts of the world. This thing had no business being on public roads. It wasn't a friendly commuter. It wasn't a beginner's bike. It was a straight-up race machine with mirrors and blinkers slapped on. At the heart of it is a 499 cubic centimeter liquid-cooled V4 two-stroke engine with twin crankshafts and Yamaha's signature YPVS Yamaha power valve system. It cranked out 88 horsepower, which doesn't sound wild today, but in a bike that weighed just 438 pounds dry, that power-to-weight ratio made it a rocket ship. This bike would hit over 135 miles per hour with a power band that went from meh to holy crap in about half a second. Riders either loved it or feared it. There was no in-between. And here's the wild part. It was 100% legal. In Canada, Australia, Europe, and Japan, you could walk into a dealership and buy one. But Yamaha never officially brought it to the US, even though demand was insane. Why? We'll get to that soon. For now, just know this. The RZ500 was Yamaha's way of saying, screw the rules, let's give people what they really want. A GP-style two-stroke V4 that smoked like a chimney, howled like a banshee, and handled like a scalpel. It was rare, raw, and ridiculous. And it only existed for a few years before it vanished. But just wait till you hear what it feels like to ride this thing. Because the power band is a story on its own. You twist the throttle, everything feels chill, then around 6,000 RPM, it's like someone lit a rocket under your seat. It's all down to the power band, really. If you've never ridden a high-strung two-stroke, buckle up, because the Yamaha RZ500 wasn't just fast, this beast was completely unhinged. Here's how it worked. Under 6,000 RPM, the bike felt like it was half asleep. Smooth, a little sluggish, maybe even disappointing. But once that tack needle hit 6,000, boom, the power kicked in like a sledgehammer to the chest. That's the infamous two-stroke snap. The sudden boost made the front wheel go light, the rear wheels squirm, and your heart nearly leap out of your chest. This was no lazy tour. It was a race bike with just enough civility to pass the legitimacy test. Most bikes build power gradually, but the RZ500, it will punch you in the gut and dare you to hang on. And the wildest part is that all that madness was hidden in a bike that looked relatively simple. A full fairing, twin headlights, standard clip-ons. It looked like any other 80s sport bike. Until it didn't, some riders couldn't handle it. Others became obsessed with it. This wasn't a bike you ride casually. Every twist of the throttle was a gamble. Every ride an adrenaline shot straight to the brain. And if you're wondering why this monster didn't make it to American roads, well, let's just say the government wasn't too thrilled about handing out 135-mile-per-hour smoke grenades to the public. If you just look at that smoke over there, on the street over there. Wait, what? There is a subscribe button. Make sure to subscribe to join our growing bikers community. So here's where things get a little murky. Yes, the Yamaha RZ500 was technically a street bike. It had headlights, turn signals, mirrors, and a license plate mount. Heck, it even came with a center stand. But let's be honest, this thing had no business sitting in a parking lot next to your buddy's Virago. Yamaha knew what they were doing. They wanted to bring Grand Prix thrills to the street, but they also knew the US wasn't going to be down with a two-stroke V4 spewing blue smoke and screaming to 10,000 RPM. So guess what? The RZ500 never made it stateside. Officially, that is. You could buy it in Canada, Europe, Japan, and Australia, but not in the US. Why? Because of the terrible smoke emissions and the mountain of regulations that come as a result. The two-stroke engines burn oil with fuel. They're loud, dirty, and not exactly EPA approved. The US government had started cracking down hard on emissions in the 80s, and the RZ500 didn't even come close to passing the sniff test. That didn't stop American riders from getting creative. Guys were importing them from Canada, converting the speedometers from kilometers to miles, and hoping nobody at the DMV noticed. It became a kind of underground club. If you had an RZ500 in the US, you were in the know. And while most bikes tiptoed into compliance, the RZ500 flipped the whole system. It wasn't going to play ball. It was fast, smelt like burning oil, and made your neighbors hate you. Still, Yamaha didn't just slap this thing together and hope for the best. They packed it with real racing DNA. And what they includes, straight off the racetrack, will make you question how this bike ever made it into a showroom. Too loud for the law? Here's the real noise behind the band. Let's talk about something every RZ500 owner knows too well. The sound. It wasn't just loud. We're talking ear-splitting, high-pitched, ring in your skull for days kind of noise. See, the Yamaha RZ500 was powered by a 499 cubic centimeter V4 two-stroke. That means it didn't hum, it didn't growl, it shrieked. 4 exhaust pipes, no catalytic converters, and an engine designed to hit over 10,000 RPM. You'd twist the throttle and the whole block would hear it. Forget a stealthy ride. This thing announced your arrival like an air raid siren in a quiet town. And back in the 1980s, that was a huge problem. The Department of Transportation, DOT, was already cracking down on motorcycle noise. Harleys were getting quieter. Big touring bikes were being muffled. Then Yamaha shows up with a chainsaw on wheels. Nowhere in the world that would fly. 2-strokes are naturally noisier than 4-strokes. They fire once every revolution instead of every other, which means more combustion, more exhaust pulses, and way more volume. And with 4 cylinders doing that at once, you can imagine the noise. This wasn't just some hooligan machine with a loud pipe. It was built this way from the factory. Now throw in the fact that emissions rules were already making life hell for 2-strokes, and Yamaha probably sat down and said, all right, emissions are one problem, but if we've also got to pass noise limits, forget it. It wasn't worth the battle, not for a niche bike. So instead of fighting the regulators, Yamaha just didn't bring it over. Canada got it, Europe got it, even Australia got it. But the US, nada. If you hear one today, it'll still stop you in your tracks. That piercing scream is unmistakable. Some say it's annoying, because riding it fast was one thing. Riding it well was a whole different game. Up next, we're talking about a trait that separates the brave from the broken. I tell you, this thing had a mind of its own. It had mood swings, and cornering felt a lot like anger. Seriously, this bike was all red flags. Handling so sketchy it made corners feel like coin tosses. All right, remember, we spoke about the speed. We also spoke about the crazy scream, more like screech. But what happens when you actually try to ride the RZ500 hard, like corners, late brake into a tight turn, throttle out of an apex? Well, you better say a quick prayer and trust your gut, because this bike was damn fast, but it wasn't easy to turn. So here's the breakdown. The RZ500's frame was made from aluminum box section, pretty advanced for 1984 and lighter than most steel setups at the time. But Yamaha did something weird. They gave it a mildly flexible frame on purpose. I guess they were chasing comfort. But the result, at high speeds or aggressive lean angles, it could feel kind of vague, almost like the front and rear weren't on the same page. Add to that is a 438-pound dry weight. Not exactly featherlight for a 2-stroke, and most of that weight sat up high thanks to the tall engine design and twin radiators. It felt top-heavy, especially with a full tank of gas. 5.2 gallons equals around 31 pounds of sloshy fuel. That means when you're pushing it into corners, it's twitchy, sometimes stable, sometimes not. A real Jekyll and Hyde experience, if you ask me. Now toss in 1980s suspension tech, air-assisted front forks, and a monoshock out back. Good for the era, sure, but by today's standards, let's just say you'll feel everything, including your own bad decisions. And then there's the power delivery. Thanks to the YPVS, Yamaha Power Valve System, it tried to smooth things out, but once you hit the power band, usually around 6,000 to 8,000 RPM, boom! The bike wakes up and surges forward like it's trying to launch off the planet. Mid-corner throttle mistakes can and will be costly. So yeah, it's meant to be handled like a racer, but it demanded respect. If you weren't ready, it bit back. Still, the bike had one big saving grace. It was something most bikes today still can't offer. Raw, untamed fun. But while riders saw a rebel, the suits at the DOT and EPA saw a paperwork storm coming. And what happened next involved red tape, regulations, and Yamaha doing some serious advanced mathematics. Can't blame them though. The certification nightmare Yamaha just didn't want all right. Let's say you're Yamaha in 1984. You've built this wild V4 two-stroke rocket, the RZ500. It's fast, loud, smokes like a chimney, and rides like a GP bike on caffeine. Now you're thinking, hey, let's bring it to the US. But then the lawyers and engineers walk in holding stacks of paperwork taller than a Harley dresser bag. Because to sell any motorcycle in the US, it's not just ship it and they will come. Nope, you gotta get it certified. That means running it through EPA EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, and DOT, Department of Transportation testing. And two-strokes don't like tests. The RZ500 would have flunked emissions right out of the gate. All that premix, all that blue smoke, the EPA would have thrown the book at it. And that wasn't all. There were noise regulations, safety rules, and lighting standards that needed to be met. Plus, everything had to be retested for the US market. New manuals, new gauges, new compliance stickers, the whole works. That meant time, that meant money. And for what? A bike that maybe a few thousand die-hard riders would actually buy? Yamaha looked at the US market and saw a crowd moving toward four strokes, comfort, and practicality. The average American buyer wasn't begging for a high-strung, maintenance-heavy two-stroke GP replica. And just like that, the RZ500 stayed overseas. Now, of course, that didn't stop the US. American riders still got their hands on them through gray imports, private sales, sneaky DMV workarounds. But Yamaha played it safe. Too many hoops, but not enough dough. Shrill, even if they had brought it over, riders would have had to deal with another problem. Because while the RZ500 had the heart of a racer, its handling had a few secrets. Some good, some sketchy. Thing is, even if Yamaha had jumped through all the hoops, passed the noise tests, paid the certification costs, handled the insurance drama, there was still one massive problem staring them in the face. Because no matter how wild, how fast, or how cool the RZ500 was, most American riders just didn't want it. And what Yamaha did next pretty much sealed the bike's fate. Wrong bike, wrong time, when the market moved on. The year is 1984, where the street fashion was big hair, baggy jeans, and even bigger shifts in the motorcycle world. American riders were falling out of love with two-strokes, and just as Yamaha was fine-tuning their fire-breathing RZ500, the US market was quietly saying, yeah, we're good. Why? Because the average American rider was chasing something else entirely. They wanted reliability. They wanted comfort. They wanted a bike that could eat miles, not pistons. And that meant four strokes. Clean, smooth, quieter, easier to insure, easier to ride. They didn't foul plugs, chug oil, or make the neighbors think there was a chainsaw massacre next door. Bikes like the Honda VF 750F were stealing the show. Liquid-cooled V4s, sporty but refined. And when Suzuki dropped the GSX R750, that was game over. It had race cred, but with four-stroke manners. Meanwhile, the RZ500 was this twitchy, high-strung, two-stroke GP replica. Cool? Absolutely. But practical? Not even close. The timing just wasn't right. By the time US riders might have caught on to the RZ500's magic, the industry had shifted. Sport touring was on the rise. Crotch rockets were going mainstream, and two-strokes were fading fast. So Yamaha made the call, focus on what sells. Leave the RZ500 to the rest of the world. And honestly, it's kind of poetic, because that's exactly why the RZ500 is still so special today. It wasn't built to follow trends, it was built to defy them. Now, coming up next, we're going to wrap this up with the final verdict. Was Yamaha right to keep the RZ500 out of the US? Or did we just miss out on the ride of a lifetime? Simply too dangerous, a lawsuit waiting to happen. So imagine that you're a Yamaha exec in the 80s, sipping coffee, looking at the spec sheet of the RZ500. Then you glance over at your legal team, and they're already sweating. Because this bike wasn't just fast, it was unpredictable. And giving it to the general public in the US was lawsuit just waiting to happen. This thing was built like a race bike, plain and simple. Built to mimic the YZR 500 GP machine, it had serious top-end speed and a violent power band. At around 6,000 RPM, it went from polite to possessed, and if you weren't ready for that hit, you were either in a wheelie, a tank slapper, or the hospital. That scared the shit out of insurance companies. They started labeling high-performance two-strokes as uninsurable, or jacking up premiums so high it made ownership nearly impossible. And Yamaha knew it. Bringing the RZ500 to the US meant battling not just emissions and noise, but also liability. One crash, one lawsuit, one parent blaming Yamaha for selling a race bike to a kid, and then multi-million-dollar headache. So instead of risking it, Yamaha backed off, which is why, to this day, owning an RZ500 in the US still feels rebellious. It's like you're riding something you were never supposed to touch, because technically you weren't. But guess what? That danger, that risk, that's exactly why collectors and riders are going nuts for this thing now. And if you're thinking about buying one today, you had better quit the idea. And now the bonus section. If you're thinking of getting this Yamaha Thunderbolt, what should you look look out for. Listen up, owning an RZ500 isn't like picking up your average cruiser. First off, condition is key. These bikes are over 35 years old now. Many have been raced hard or left sitting in garages, so you want to find one that's been well cared for. Look for signs of rust, leaks, or smoke. Two strokes burn oil, but excessive smoke is not a good sign. Next, the engine and power band require respect. The RZ500's V4 two-stroke kicks in hard, around 6,000 RPM. That sudden power surge can catch you off guard if you're not used to it. So make sure the previous owner kept the engine tuned and the expansion chambers in good shape. Replacing or repairing those pipes isn't cheap. Electrical gremlins are common too. Check all lights, gauges, and the ignition system. Parts are rare, so finding spares might take some hunting or lots of dollars. And speaking of parts, the fuel system needs love. Two strokes are picky about clean fuel and oil mix. Carburetors can get jammed up if the bike's been sitting idle. A full carb rebuild might be necessary. Lastly, don't overlook brakes and suspension. They're old school but effective if maintained. Upgrading them is an option, but keep it in taste. This bike's charm is its vintage feel. Owning an RZ500 is a passion project. It's loud, it's wild, it's a bit temperamental, and that's what makes it so addictive. If you're ready for that kind of ride, welcome to a club that's as exclusive as the bike itself. The Yamaha RZ500 was a two-stroke monster that roared into the world like it had no business existing, and somehow still managed to become one of the most legendary bikes of its time. It was fast, loud, unpredictable, and totally illegal for the US. And maybe that's what made it so special. Whether you love it for the raw power, the scream of that V4, or just because it was the bike we were never supposed to have, one thing's for sure, the RZ500 is a piece of outlaw history on two wheels. We've got more badass bike stories coming your way, so click the video that is coming on the screen right now, and trust us, you won't want to miss it. Catch you in the next video.